Everybody hear me? I'm not sure. Okay.
Yeah.
If you can't hear me, raise your hand. Okay. Well, it's a pleasure for me to be here today, especially during the 50th anniversary of our association. And if it wasn't for the association, I wouldn't be here. That ain't better. How about that? Is that better? Is that all right? Okay. So if it wasn't for the AFA, I wouldn't be here. And I really appreciate all you guys coming to listen to my spiel. People think of frog support, and I don't think they really understand what it is or what it means and why it's necessary. I remember years ago when I first started reading books and everything, and I would run across things that said the frog had to touch the ground all the time. Well, my friend Dennis over there lives in a place where the frog sometimes never sees the ground. Is that right, Dennis? With those hard feet. And where it's most important, I believe, is horses that have a lower angle, or what we would call a normal angle of around 50 or 53 degrees. You go up higher than that with angles and you don't have so much leverage on the lamina. The lamina is much stronger with an upright foot than it is with a lopian foot. And so if you live in parts of the world where you don't have a lot of what I'm going to talk about, you're lucky. Because where we live, where I live, there's a lot of flat-footed horses, there's a lot of moisture, and there's a lot of sore horses, and sometimes people don't even know why they're sore. So I figured I'd give you a little bit of my background, because as I look out here, I see a lot of friends and a lot of people I've known for many, many years. But I also see a lot of people that I don't know and that I haven't seen before. And the younger generation is taking over, as you know, and us old guys are up here trying to pass along what we've learned in our 50 or 60 years of work. And you saw that this presentation is done by Myron McLane. Well, who the heck is Myron McLane? I think he sells acorns. But Myron McLane started out as a child, very young. I don't know why. I can't give you an explanation for it, but I always loved horses. And this picture was taken when I was about 6 or 7 years old at my home in Fall River, Massachusetts with my sister. And you can see I'm holding a horse. Then to the right of this picture, there was a picket fence. And I used to have an old blanket that I used to throw over the picket fence. And I would sit on the blanket and I'd tie a hay string around the fence and I'd pretend that I was riding a horse. Now, why was I like that? I don't know. We didn't have much television where I could see horses and cowboys all the time at that time. And I have no idea why I had the passion for it, but that's how I started liking horses. And over the years, when I started shoeing horses, I found out then that I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing. It was monkey see, monkey do. I tried to sneak up on guys and watch them. And there was no literature available to me to learn anything in that respect. So I shot horses as well as I could for about 2 or 3 years. And when I was 21 years old, right after I got married, I got a phone call from a fellow that I had been trimming some racehorses for, and he said, there's a guy up in Medfield, Mass. Looking for an apprentice. And I said, give me the number. I don't know, I didn't care who he was. I just wanted to go with somebody that would teach me. As it turned out, as you see in the slide, McCarthy's blacksmith shop, Bob McCarthy is gone now, he's not with us anymore, but he was one of the greatest horseshoers on the East Coast at that time. And he was looking for an apprentice. Now, it doesn't get much better than that, you know, it's like hitting the lottery. So I went up there, went to work for Bob, and I stayed with him for 8 years. And at the end of that period, I was showing a lot of standardbred horses in the backyards of the farms, and there was a racetrack, a place opened up at the racetrack, one of the shops, and Bob encouraged me to go to the racetrack. And there were standardbred racehorses. And the main reason, I had originally thought that I wanted to shoot thoroughbred horses, because we did a lot of them on the farms. But I knew the standardbred guys were the top level of skill at the time, at least I thought so. And so, and I wanted to really be good. I wanted to learn and be good. And the racetrack seemed to be the place to go. So I went. I got the shot, and I stayed there for 18 years. And in those 18 years, the things that I learned, of course, is gaits and soundness, stuff like that. It's just, I can't even begin to tell you how much I learned there. If it wasn't right when it left the shop, they didn't win when it went on the racetrack. And you knew if you made a mistake because the horse would come back bleeding or something, they'd be hitting themselves. And so the racetrack was a good place for me at that time. And then I got in a rut. I shot there for many years. But during that time, I was getting burned out. Shooting 10 horses a day, and I just got burned out. There had to be something more in life. And Bob encouraged me earlier on to join the AFA, and I knew about the contests and everything. And I said, oh, I want to go to those contests because I want to find out how my work compares with other guys' work. That's when I started contesting. And eventually, after the first full year of competition, I went to the AFA, and I gained a place on the team. And being on the American Farriers team was a whole new world to me. Not only did I get a chance to travel and go to other countries, but I made friends that were just unbelievable. Dennis Manning especially was on the team with me. This is just a picture. We had a little reunion down my way at one time, and these are the fellows that came. You might recognize some of them. This was over at Clothesman, Scotland, shooting the Clydesdale horses. And I remember Dennis Manning won the best shot foot over there that day. And the horse's foot looked like he stepped on a landmine. And you know, you're supposed to have 8 nails or 7 nails, whatever the shoes call for. And there was no wall in that area of the foot for Dennis, so he punched nail holes where he could get nails. And they were so impressed by his work. He won the best shot foot. And then when I got back, during that period of time, there was a veterinarian that I had done some work for, and he said, what is your plan when the racetrack closes? And I said, well, I'd like to have a blacksmith shop and do language work. And he stood there and he said, what's the matter with putting it right there? And so it became the McLane blacksmith shop just across from where he had his clinic. And I've been there since, I think, 1985. And we built that shop. I designed it and built it, and I've been there ever since. This is the inside of that shop. And then I started to get burned out again. And I judged a contest in Dallas. And it was a big arena, and the judging place was upstairs, and you overlooked the arena. And in the previous year that they ran that contest, they had a problem with the judging. They thought that there was some funny stuff going on, and they wanted me to be just completely private in that room to judge. And he said, is there anything you need? I said, I need a scribe. And I was looking out the window at the horses down in the arena, and somebody opened the door, closed the door, and came in. And I turned around, and here's this big, tall cowboy. And he says, "How you doing, McLane? I'm Bernie Jack." And that's when I met Bernie. And from that day on, we were very good friends. And I had the opportunity to travel with him a lot, work on a lot of founder horses. And he taught me what I'm trying to relate to you. And I'm not going to go into laminitis today, but that's where I learned to use the frog support. And it was even more dramatic with the type of work that we were doing resections and horses that were laying down and they were actually dying. And you had to be right or the horse would die. And I said, I didn't go on to be a veterinarian because I didn't want life and death hanging on what I did. And I ended up doing that, which was very similar. So Bernie, that's my daughter Amy, and the horse that they're holding is a horse that I was shoeing for a lady, and it got laminitis, and the lady couldn't afford to treat it or even keep it. So I bought it from her for $1. And Amy took care of it, and Bernie helped me with it, and tore sections of whole work, and the horse ended up being a good jumper. He was sound as a bell of grass after we got new feet on. So that was encouraging to me at the time. But like I say, Bernie and I became good friends. We traveled a lot together, and I was able to learn things from him that he couldn't tell everybody, because it was the hours in the motel rooms and the hotel rooms at night when we were traveling that we passed information back to each other. And that's where I learned a lot of it. So when they asked me to do this about frog support, they asked me what I wanted to name it. And that's where I come up with the using and understanding frog support, because I can show you how to do it, or try to show you how to do it. But if you don't know why you put the frog plate where it is, you don't know why you fit it the way you fit it, then it's monkey see, monkey do. And that maybe only works 1% of the time. I don't know why that's not centered in there. You can't see the bottom, but that's all right, I know what it says. The common causes of subpar performance, that means a horse that doesn't come in three-legged, is not grade 5 lame, he comes in, he looks like he's sound, but the client says, I don't know what's wrong with my horse. He starts backing off from the jumps every once in a while now. Or it's a race horse and he gets to the 7/8 pole and he starts backing down. He seems to lose his effort to win. Or it's just a trail horse and the people say, well, he used to want to go and now I got to spur him to go. That type of a situation. Those are subpar performance. In other words, the horse is a number 10 in performance, but now he's performing in number 5. And that takes a $200,000 horse and makes him worth $175. And so some of the causes for that is road founder, mechanical founder, which we'll go into in a bit, and white line disease, where the coffin bone becomes unstable. Quarter cracks. You notice it says internal and external. It's another thing that Bernie taught me. And I saw a lot of quarter cracks on standard bred horses at the racetrack. A lot of them were caused by the common cause of quarter cracks, which is imbalance of the hoof capsule. In other words, the washer's fault. If you don't balance the foot right and it's under 100% extreme stress, sometimes the hoof wall will just blow over. But on the contrary of that, many times a horse will have a quarter crack that hasn't blown open yet. So how is that possible? Well, a quarter crack has like 2 stages. First, the lamina behind the wall gets damaged. And when lamina gets damaged, internally it bleeds. It doesn't bleed when you drive a nail into it because that's insensitive lamina. But the sensitive lamina that connects the wall, if it gets damaged, it bleeds. And when it bleeds, it's a foreign object in the hoof wall, and eventually the hoof wall breaks open at that site. And that's when you see that the horse has a quarter crack. Previous to that, you probably didn't know the horse had a quarter crack. You might, if you put a hoof test on, you might get some sensitivity there. But that's how quarter cracks work. So you say, how do you know that? Well, I know that because on the racetrack, I saw a lot of them. And there was two kinds. There was traumatic injury, where there was a pileup on the racetrack and one horse stepped on the other horse's foot, or a horse made a bad jump in a race going 40 miles an hour, and one hind foot came up and hit the front foot, and the foot burst open. That's a traumatic injury. It bursts open like a water. The other thing is a quarter crack that's caused from stress, in other words, imbalance. You got to remember that standard bred horses race on a surface as hard as this floor. The harder the surface is, the faster they go, so they keep it hard. Contrary to what we see in the show horses of today that have beautiful footing to go with and everything. So if the horse isn't balanced and the hoof capsule isn't carrying an even weight, the foot will break open. But those horses would sometimes come in, they'd bring the horse in, and if it was a traumatic injury, there'd be red blood pouring out all over the floor. But if it was a quarter crack that had been there for a while, and I cleaned it up with my loop knife, there'd be all black blood in there. Well, blood turns black after it's old. And the old blood indicates that it bled a long time ago, and it just now burst open. So that's how you can tell the difference between what we call a green quarter crack and a quarter crack that's been there for some time. And you'll also know because the client or the racehorse will have gone to a certain point on the racetrack and then stop backing off because his foot start hurts him so much. And a lot of horses, Arabians especially, and standard bred horses, you don't know when they're hurt because they're tough as nails and they don't go late. They just keep going. They're kind of like horseshoes. But all these things can be treated with frog support successfully. And I know that all of you see these things, at least one or two of them once in a while. And to know that you can treat them or make them, help them, is very important. This is an old business card I found at an antique shop. And I don't know what year it's from. It's from Peoria, Illinois. But it says on there, I don't know if you can read it, but it says that the guy fixes all kinds of hoof problems. And he also fixes trush from TRUSA. And anyway, the interesting thing that I thought was that it was a hard bar shoe. And this is an old car. So this was long before Bernie was conceived, never mind. So I just put that in there to point out the fact that this is not anything new. People knew that this was a problem and how to treat it for a long, long time. They did not use, as far as I know, I've never heard it any place in the literature or anything, and Dennis might have some idea, but I've never heard of a hard bar shoe being used for laminitis until Bernie Chapman. And it was used for road foam, or the prevention of road foam. But for laminitis, I've never heard of it being used. Not that it wasn't, it's I've got a collection of shoes at home, and the one on the left was given to me by Brad Davis in Canada, and that's probably the finest example in my collection. But one thing that you can notice in these old draft horse shoes is that the frog plate is not pointed as much as the ones that we use today, and I'm going to explain that later on. But I'll go to the next slide. This particular shoe, and you can see that this one, the heel caulks have disappeared. They broke off with a faulty weld. But But with both of these examples, they had toe caulks and heel caulks which raised the frog way up off the ground. And if they had been working in soft dirt on the farm, wouldn't matter. But these were from the cities. And the cities had paved or cobbled roads which were very hard. And in the big cities where they had cobble, that's when they used a lot of these caulks, so the horses wouldn't slip. The cobble was very slippery, like this floor would be, even though it had notches in between. But anyway, that's how these horses rode from. And another thing that's interesting, this shoe on the left was made from the branches of the shoe being turned in and well, like a lot of guys make hard shoes today. But this one here, this is an independent plate that was dropped, that was jump welded into that shoe. And I have never seen one in an antique shop. I've never seen one of those plates. If you go into the marketplace here, you'll see them all over the place, these frog plates that are manufactured. But that's the only one I've ever seen. And again, it was a little bit more pointed than this one because it was manufactured and it was made, I guess, to look like the frog. But anyway, there's two kinds of frog support. When Bernie and I would go and work on a horse, there'd always be another one nearby, down the street or in the next town. And people say, oh, please, Bernie, come and work on my horse. Well, we only had enough stuff to do the first horse. So we go to the second horse, and for an emergency frog support, we would use a roll of gauze or a roll of bandage and just wrap it, put it on the frog, rolled up, and bandage the foot. And this would give frog support, emergency frog support, you might say, to horses that were acutely laminated. And that would be one form of frog support, but it's not practical for what we're doing. So there's two kinds of frog support. There's static frog support, which you get. Static means it doesn't move, it just stays there. This is a good example of frog support, a hard shoe. This particular shoe is one of Stephen Bean's shoes, and it's a spectacular example of a handmade hard shoe made out of our stock. It fits the foot the way it's supposed to fit, but it's a static frog support. In other words, once this shoe is fit, nailed on, it's there. It's there, and that's it. It doesn't move, hopefully. But dynamic frog support, on the other hand, is using some of the device it's not frog support all the time. It's only frog support when the horse stands on it. And that's what my pad is. It's a dynamic frog support. The frog support relieves weight from the hoof wall, and that's important because the coronary artery is what the hoof wall grows from. And if that coronary artery is compromised by weight or imbalance, something like that, the blood supply is reduced significantly in some cases. So that's one thing that the frog support does. And it also, what it does is how does it do? It puts the weight on the frog. It takes, so that in a normal, perfect horse, the frog takes up some of the weight, the hoof wall takes up some of the weight. And I remember in Dennis's presentation, he was talking about hop fitting and whether the wall, where the frog, the sole should carry any of the weight. And I hope you saw this presentation, the best presentation I ever saw in my whole life, so I hope you saw it. But it was interesting to me, Dennis, when I saw that you did that, because I've given many examples of what we call shared load, where the hoof wall carries a good percentage of the weight, but the frog and the sole also carries some of the weight. But the thing with sole carrying the weight, it's only It's only a small percentage of it near the white line that can carry the weight without being injured. And the blood supply, blood supply is the secret of a healthy foot. There we go. All right. The placement of frog support. Everybody says, well, where, should we put it here and there? The placement of the frog support is the end of the frog plate should be a plumb line down from the extensor processor P3. And why it has to do with the coffin bone rotation and the way the coffin bone moves with our stands on it. So if the frog support ended here, back in here, it would actually cause the coffin bone to drop down because it wouldn't be supported out here where it needs it. And if you extend the frog support too far, I'll explain that in a minute why that's not a good deal. Now, as I said, the coronary artery lives in this little pie-shaped piece of horn. It lives behind it right there, and it goes all the way around the foot. And the circumflex artery is a critical thing to worry about because that's between the coffin bone and the sole. And that's the one that gets compromised when you get sole pressure. And it shuts off, or the coffin bone sinks or something, it's sole pressure, and it compromises that artery. So that's why it's important to. These are supposed to come in one at a time, but it doesn't, so that's okay. But this is a hoof capsule showing that the digital arteries run on the side of the frog. They come down here and form the terminal arch. But these are the arteries that run on the side of the frog, and the coronary artery lives in this pie-shaped area at the top of the hoof wall. It's slow on the ground. So when you're shoeing a horse, you have to know where those arteries are, where the blood supply is, in order to preserve it, to make sure that it's not interrupted by anything. And this drawing is from an old book of the blood supply of the horse's foot, and you can see the digital arteries come here in the back of the heel, and they run down on either side of the frog to the terminal arch. And there's your circumflex artery on the bottom of the coffin bone. And when you look at the horse's foot, this is where they are. They're on either side of the frog and right here. And that goes to show you why you don't want that frog support to be wider than the frog. If it is on an ordinary riding horse, it's not gonna kill it. But if you do it on a founded horse where you have tremendous rotation and tremendous damage, then those arteries get crushed. So why not do it right all the time? But I was going to mention that those frog supports on the shoes that I showed you, the draft horse shoes, they weren't shaped like this. They had a bigger blunt end to it. So and I think the way they got away with that was that, I'm not saying the frogs were prolapsed, but they were down, they were really down, and the feet were flat on most of the Josephs as well. And so there was very little chance of interrupting these two digital arteries if any weight was carried on. But and I think that's how they got away with that. So if you raise the heel with whatever reason, whatever device or method that you want to raise the heel, vet comes in, the trainer comes in and says, look, this horse got a real flat foot, we got to get those heels up. I don't know why they say that, right? You got a real small foot there, you got to make it small. Or one guy told me, he says, this horse's feet are too big, we got to make them small. You know, I mean, that's and that's coming from professional horsemen saying things like that. But when they tell you to raise the heel because it doesn't look good or something, it's crazy. But anyway, if you do raise the heel, let's say the horse has a tendon injury and you want to raise the heel for the horse to recover. Don't raise the heel without frog support. Don't go against the horse's conformation. If the horse has a 49-degree angle on his casting, make the foot a 49-degree angle. Say, well, 49-degree angle? What are you talking about? That's no good. Well, it's good for that horse. I wear a size 11. Well, you don't like size 11, you should be using a size 10. It's the same thing. My friend Garrett Maloney sent me this example of a horse that he was working on. And you can see that I don't know how they did it. I don't know whether this is some sort of a wedge or if it's acrylic material, what it is. But anyway, they raised this horse's heel. And it's a perfect example of what happens. You can see where the hoof capsule has jammed and there's been no growth, absolutely no growth from this ring. Everything that's down here was there before. There hasn't been any growth. And it won't grow because there's no blood supply in that heel, that foot, because the coronary artery is completely jammed. It's like driving a truck over a garden hose, and there's no water coming out the other end of the hose. And you can see this white line shows where the heel of the foot is, and you can see where the frog is. And the frog is prolapsed that much. That means the bony column is sinking. The weight of the horse is held up by the lamina, hoof wall. The bone's connected to the hoof wall with lamina. And that lamina can stretch, it can be ripped, it can be torn, it can be crushed. Because it's not really designed to do what we're making it do by doing this. So, this was great. When I saw this, the vet told me that he saw it in the veterinary journal some years back. It was done in 2009. Jason Mackey, and I'm sorry he's not here, but he's at A&M. He's a farrier at A&M, and they won't let any of their employees travel because of COVID, so he couldn't come. But he gave me permission a long time ago to use this as an example in my lectures, because it's a great description of what happens when you raise a horse's heel. Now, this is amazing. These photographs were taken. There's a special method they use to take these, where the horse never moved, and this is a live horse that they put these wedges on. This is the horse's foot. He had a flat foot, and his frog and hoof wall were level when they put the shoe on. So they raised the heel because the vet didn't like the angle. In 6 minutes. I don't know if you can see with that says 6 minutes. Look how far it dropped down. And this is 15 minutes. No, this is 10 minutes and this is 15 minutes. That's an amazing example of what happens when you use some method of wedging the heels without a frog support. This is a horse that I worked on. The red line shows where his hoof wall is, and this was a leather wedge pad. People tell me, oh, I use leather. That doesn't hurt a foot because it's soft and it moves and it sinks. The hoof sinks into it only to a certain extent. There's always something solid after it goes together. There's a solid mass, and it creates a larger space between the ground and the hoof wall. And this shoe and that. And you can see this is a recent application. And how do I know that? Because there's no damage to the coronary gland yet, like you saw in the other slide. So this horse was one of those subpar horses. They brought the horse in, he was lame, he was a hunter jumper horse. And they said, you know, he was doing really well, and then we raised his heel a little bit because he had low heels, and now he doesn't want to jump. Well, there you go. All I did with this horse was take that shoe off, and I let him stand on his feet for, I think it was like 2 or 3 hours in the stall in my shop. And then I just shot him with a normal shoe, and he went off center. I didn't put frog support on him because he had beautiful foot. And this is absolutely ridiculous. Why anybody would do something like this? It's obvious that this is putting tremendous pressure on that heel. Not to mention the fact that, well, it wasn't too short when it was applied, but it's too short now because the whole hoof cap is dropping off the back. And not only that, just as a point of information, if you do this to a hind foot, you're going to blow the suspensions. Unless the horse is just standing in the stall, he's going on or something. But if he's going to go to work, we're going to blow his suspensions, raising his heels behind leg. This is how I dealt with this prolapsed frog. I see on Facebook a lot of things about horses with feet problems like this, and everybody says, well, you can't use a frog support, you can't use a hard bar shoe, or you can't use Myron's pad on a horse that's got a prolapsed frog. Well, this is how I did it with this particular horse. There's always a way, if you understand what you're trying to do. I fit the shoe, and I cut the pad to fit and everything. But now I've got this big gap in there, because the frog is taking up space. I can't put the shoe down on the foot. So I could have nailed it on. I could have nailed it on. The horse could have had 100% of his weight on the frog, and he would have been sound. I know that. That's another thing I wanted to tell you. The frog can bear as much weight as you want to put on. Weight bearing on the frog is not a problem. And somebody will say, well, I put a hard bar on a horse and he couldn't put his foot down. You didn't put weight on it. You nailed the shoe that jammed this frog up into the coffin bone and pushed the coffin bone up against the anterior wall, and that's why he couldn't stand it. Because you put pressure instead of support. We're not doing frog pressure, we're doing frog support. That means the device is touching the frog. It's not pushing it. That people got that idea, I think, when Bernie was doing lectures, he showed a lot of horses that had toe resections. They had rotation. We used to do a toe resection, and we put a hard bar on it and set the frog plate up so where there was a space like this between the shoe, and then nail it on. It would actually lift that coffin bone. Right, if the tendon wasn't affected yet, where it couldn't move, it would lift the coffin bone right back up into a normal position. But you have to take the hoof wall off first. Otherwise, there's stuff there. You can't lift it. There's a demon's lamina. So now you got this space. The pad is made of plastic, and Equidane just happens to make plastic, liquid, basically liquid plastic. So I found out from the Equidane guys that this super fast Equidane is the same plastic as my pad is made of. I don't know if it's exactly the same, but they're very compatible, the same type of plastic. So if the pad is clean and you apply super fast to it, it actually becomes part of the pad. And it won't fall off, you don't have to glue it on or anything, it just becomes part of it. So I built up the Equidane in the heel of the pad to where it was just a big pile of Equidane. And I took it to the belt sander and formed it down to almost like a wedge to fill that space. And when I put it on, the space was no longer evident. Why did I do that if I could have just nailed it on and the horse would have been sound? I did it because the shoe would not have been stable. The shoe, when the horse moved from side to side, would have tremendous torque pressure on the nails, and the nails would have broken in a day, 2 days, 3 days, but the nails were broken. They couldn't stand wiggling back and forth. So I had to support it for that reason. And this is screwing me up because these things are supposed to come in as I press the button, the lines, as I'm explaining it, but for some reason it's not doing that. So I'm just pointing out that this now brings the frog in contact with the ground. The Myron McLane pad is, let me tell you where it came from. Bernie and I did lectures all over the country for many years. And there would be a group the size that we have here today. And Bernie would do the lecture part of it and would explain what we were doing with the hard-bar shoes and how they work and all that stuff. And then after that, I would do the demonstration. Usually we'd be working on a horse. And I would shoot the horse, make the hard-bar shoes. And I used to say to Bernie at night, I said, you know, there's 150 guys at the thing today. I bet you there's not 20 of them that can make those shoes. You don't have to be a Stephen Bean to make a hard-bar shoe. But still, you have to have some sort of a welding device. Well, today you can buy ready-made hard-bar shoes, but it's pretty tough to carry enough different sizes, shapes, and everything that's going to fit the horse you're working on in a particular day. So you have to make it. Whether you make it like Stephen did, you're a good blacksmith. You can make a shoe like that from a straight mold. Good, you're good to go. But the majority of farriers in this country don't own a forge. They've never made a shoe or heated a shoe in their entire life. They're cold cake shoes. That's, believe it or not, I mean, we don't realize it in this environment, but that's the majority of the horseshoes in this country. And they need to have something that they can buy at the farrier supply that they can go to the horse and use without too much modification or anything like that, because they don't have the ability or the tools or the equipment to do it. So I told Bernie, I said, you know, it's too bad we couldn't come up with something like that guys could use to create frog support. And I decided that you could do it with a pad, but then I said, I just don't have the insight to figure out how I'm going to make that frog support rigid. I'm thinking about how we could insert a piece of metal into the mold or something to keep the frog support from moving. I just couldn't understand how I'm going to do it. And I thought about it for a year or so, a lot. And finally, one night, and this is no word of a lie, I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it hit me. And I don't know why I didn't know this right off the bat, but you kind of get tunnel vision when you're doing one thing with the frog plates and the hard-bar shoes. And I got away from that tunnel vision, and I realized that a horse does not need, no horse needs frog support if he's laying down. And also he doesn't need frog support when his foot is off the ground. He only needs frog support when he's weight bearing. And so that means that to get frog support, you just got to make sure the frog's in contact with the ground. And that's what the pad does. And so I had a horse that I was having a big problem with quarter cracks. He was a hunter horse that I had hard bars on. He had 4 quarter cracks. And 2 of them bled every once in a while. And I could not get them to grow down. I couldn't stop them from bleeding every once in a while. They wouldn't back off with a show schedule. They were showing twice a week. And he was jumping fences all the time. And I kept that horse going for a long time with those hard bars. He never took a lame step, but they bleed every once in a while. And that wasn't good, and they wouldn't grow down. So I said, I'm going to make a pad, and I'm going to try it on that horse. And if it works on that horse, I'll be happy. Long story short, I made a pad, I put them on, and the horse never bled again. cracks all grew out. It was like a miracle. To this day, I don't really know why that was better than our was, but it was. And the pads lasted like almost 2 years actually, till they got rid of the horse. And so that was the beginning of my thinking about making the pad. And I was working for Mustad at the time. They had a lot of good engineers, guys that had CNC machines for making the nails and stuff. And they helped me design it. And they actually made the prototypes in Switzerland, where they were making the plastic stuff. And I developed it from that with their help. So to fit the pad, what I do is I draw a line, an invisible line really, but I mark the shoe in a line across where I want the frog support to end at the end of the frog. And also I draw a mark at the toe of the shoe where I want the point of the frog pad to be pointing right here. Mark the length and where you want the end of the frog pad pointing. Because some frogs are not, like you get a real ding-toed horse or something like that, you're going to have more hoof wall on one side than the other. So make sure you know where it's pointing. And basically that's what you're trying to do, line it up like that. That's not rocket science. It's just knowing that that's what you should do. And eventually, if you do as many as I've done, you can throw the magic marker away because you can see it. The only thing I mark is where the clips are on the shoe so I can cut them out in the right place. Now this is the horse that I showed you that I built up the space in the heels. He had the prolapsed frog. And in 7 months, look at the hoof this horse had. This horse wasn't a flat-footed horse at all. He had like a 51-degree angle, a thoroughbred. And look at the foot that he grew. It's a beautiful foot. Frog support. And these horses I'm showing you, these are not layers or anything. These are horses that clients want to go to the show this weekend, or they want to race in the next race, whatever the horse's abilities are. They want you to fix them so they can go. And that's one of the problems with treating lame horses, is it's very seldom that you can get them to quit with a horse and give them time off. So you have to have the ability to keep the horse going. The frog support and my pads simply fills the gap between the frog and the ground. So some people say to me, why is the pad a wedge? The only reason the pad is a wedge, I had a choice. We made the first prototypes there with a pad thickness all the way to the heel, and they had the frog support. But the pad itself wasn't strong enough to keep the frog support from moving up and down. There wasn't enough mass in the back of the pad. So I had a choice, make a pad that was ½ an inch thick all the way across, which is impractical, or make it a slight wedge. And so then it turned out that the wedge was absolutely beneficial for these horses that had real low, crushed, damaged heels. They put them back in a good perspective, and if you don't need the wedge, if you have a horse that has subpar performance and the horse has some heel on him and stuff, but he's sore, he's got sole problems, just take the heel down a little bit more than you normally would, and then you end up with the same angle. This is a horse with a broken back, hoof past an axis, and again, a 100-jump show horse. And anyway, let's see if we can go back to that one. This was a horse with a broken back axis, and when I shot him, see, right back out the side again. But anyway, it just shows that the hoof past and axis was back to normal, and I shot it like that. Now what happens when a heel crushes? really what we call underslung heel, underrun heel. The horn tubes in the foot, instead of going down or at a slight angle, they almost run parallel with the ground in some cases. Now, if you look at this, you say, gee, that guy was a helmet shot, that was. Well, that was me. This was right at the time that I was changing my thinking about shoeing these types of horses. And I think that everybody in this room can agree that at that time, we put egg bars on horses with feet like this. Because they were sore-footed. We thought they needed protection in the back of the foot, so we used egg bars. Now, we used egg bars on the racetrack, but we didn't use them for this purpose, for low-heel horses. We used them to slow their gait down, shorten their stride, stuff like that. And they work for that. Because the horse lands heel first, and if he's got an egg bar sticking out the back, it grabs the ground a little bit quicker than his foot would if it didn't happen. And that's what we used them for. But these low-heel show horses, I was fitting them long and full as I dared to, so they wouldn't pull them off. And then I go back in 6 weeks, and this is what I was faced with. And the shoe would be buried in the frog, and the horse would be sore from that. And this is the thing we're trying to avoid. Now, this would never happen. This cannot happen. Would never happen if the horse had frog support. And this also won't happen on a mule or a donkey. Has anybody here ever seen a mule or a donkey with a flat foot? No. And you can't make it flat. You can wedge that thing all you want to. And it's not going to go flat because the horn tubes are facing towards the ground. These horn tubes are facing yesterday's breakfast. You know, in no way are they, there's no strength in them. There's no strength in them at all. It's like this pen. If I put something on top of this pen and could balance it, it'd have to be pretty heavy in order to damage that pen. But if the pen was like this, and all I got to do is just go like that, and it bends it, because there's no support. This has support, this doesn't. So the lower the heel, the more strain the lamina and the hoof wall are under. This is a horse that Garrett Maloney shot, that came into the shop, and you can see there's a couple things wrong with that, but we won't go into that. But the main reason we're looking at this is because you can see how this heel. This is a case where a short shoe has caused this. There's no shoe back here where it belongs, and the heel's just dropping off and finding its seat in the ground. And Garrett shot the horse with my pads, and the horse was immediately sound and went off as a good healthy horse again. And now, a foot like this will recover, as you saw on the slide I showed you, the 7-month horse. If the foot was normal, it will become normal again if you shoe it properly and take the weight off of the wall. That was another horse that, well, I don't know if it's maybe the same one that Garrett did. Can you go off on this? Yeah, that's good. I was in Savannah with my wife some years ago, and if you've seen my lectures, you've seen this before, because I'm kind of proud of it in a way. And it actually made me feel so good that something that I worked so hard at for so many years actually benefited something. I saw it. Anyway, this pair of carriage horses in Savannah, Georgia, and we got off the trolley, and the first thing we saw was these carriage horses. There was about 7 or 8 teams over there, and I was, I'm a horse show. I'm looking at the feet. I don't even know what color the horse is, but I know his feet are such and such. So I look, and the off horse has upright feet, and he's got those big, thick rubber shoes that they put on him. that cause all kinds of damage from just what we've been talking about. But this horse didn't have the rubber shoes on. And they were both well shot. Both of the horses were well shot. As a matter of fact, this off horse had one crooked foot in front, and the guy had ground all the rubber off of one side to balance it. And yeah, I could see the guy that shot the horses was a good horseshoer. So I was looking at him and I said, geez, and this mare had big flat feet, you know. And I said to the lady that was the driver, I said, do you mind if I pick up the horses first? I'm a horseshoer, I just like to look at the shoes. And she said, well, I can't let you do that. But she said, the owner is right over there. And I said, the guy with the shoes? She said, yeah. So I went over, I introduced myself to him. I said, I didn't say who I was. I just said, I'm a horseshoer, and I was wondering if I could look at the horse's feet. Can I pick up the feet? He says, no. He says, I'll pick them up for you. Because I'm a tourist, right? I got shorts on. And you can't imagine me going over and pick up his horse's foot. So he goes over and he picks up the horse's foot. That's me, you know. I don't look like a guy that can pick up a foot. So he picks it up, and there it is. And I look at it and I said, oh. I said, what's the story with this? Well, he says, I've had this mare for a good number of years, and she started going lamer and lamer and lamer, and finally we were going to have to get rid of her because she's so lame she couldn't walk. And she said, Steve said to me, my horseshoer said to me, I got something we're going to put on this horse and we'll see what happens. So he said, you put these pads on, and the next day we had her back to work, and she's been living there for 2 years, and she's sound all the time. She works every day. And I said, wow. I said, that's really great. And he said, where are you from? I said, I'm from Massachusetts. I said, you see right there? And I pointed to her. And he said, yeah. I said, what's that say? And he said, Myron McLane. I said, oh, I'm glad to meet you. And he said, you're Myron McLane? I said, yeah. And he told me the story about the horse and everything, and I was so happy. You know, this kid's 6 years old. All they care about is horses and to help them and stuff like that. And to see that and hear that story, I was speechless. And he whipped out his flip phone and he pushed one button. He had a guy on speed dial, and it was Steve Prescott from North Carolina who shot the horse. And he said, I got a guy here, he says his name is Myron McLane, and he's looking at the feet. And he said, I can hear Steve yelling, he's what? Don't worry, what did he say? And he told me, he said, oh, he's really impressed with the work, you know. And I didn't even know at the time who Steve Prescott was, but I went to Laminitis when they had like a reunion of all the guys that had done lectures there over the years when they were closing up. And I was going to show this there. And I said to the lady in the store, I said, do you know who shoes the horses in Savannah? And she says, that tall guy over there. And it was Steve Prescott. So I snuck up behind him with my cell phone, and I took his picture. And I went quick, and I put it into my presentation. And I showed it like I just showed it to you. And then the next slide was a picture of Steve. I said, this is the guy that did it. And he had no idea. He had no idea about any of this. And he was so embarrassed. He's a big, tall guy, and he was up above everybody else. And it was really cool. Now this is it's going to have to go too. Good. Look down a little more. Oh, I know the other way. Oh, that is good. We're going to the airport in Zurich, Switzerland. We're going to Italy for a presentation. They had this big, well, it was as big as this. As big as that whole unit. It was an advertisement for an insurance company. And it was a picture of Tiger Woods. And Tiger Woods is standing there with his golf club and a golf ball, and he's getting ready to hit it. You know, that was the picture that was on there. And the caption was, "It comes a time when execution is more important than theory." And that just hit home when I read that. And I said, there's nowhere in the world that that's any more true than it is in Farragut. You can go over here to the contest, and you can watch some of the best shoemakers in the world making shoes. But if they can't put those shoes on and execute what they're doing, what good is it? The theory and all everything comes previous to that is useless. You can be the biggest brain in the world when it comes to knowing anatomy. And I was talking to a fellow today, and I think he's here somewhere about anatomy. Raise your hand, there you go, behind Dennis. And I was telling him how important it was to know anatomy. But I don't know I know anatomy like I'm talking to you. But I couldn't go in front of a professional veterinary association and give an anatomy lesson. You know, I'm not that good at it. I know some guys that are, but knowing the anatomy, some of these guys are the biggest brains in the world, and they might be able to go and buy a hard shoe, or even make a hard shoe. But can they put it on? Can they execute the job? And that's why when I do clinics for farriers, live clinics where they come and I make them hard shoe for the foot, I make them apply it, fit it, and apply it. That's where that separates them in from the boys. You can be the worst. Bernie Chapman was one of my best friends ever. And I have no more respect for anybody in the world that had Bernie Chapman. But Bernie Chapman wasn't a good horse show when I met him. He was a cowboy show. I mean, don't get me wrong, I shouldn't say that he was a good horse show. He was a cowboy show. He shot with just, cold kick. Sometimes they didn't even have an handle. But the frog support that he welded into those shoes was always where it needed to be. And that was the whole secret behind it. And, execution of what your theory is very important. Making and fitting these shoes, making and fitting these steel hot wash shoes is, I put this in because it's something that if you're going to do them like I do, you're going to have the frog plates made, or you're going to make them. And this is the way I make my frog plates. These are store-bought frog plates that you can go to the Farrier Supply and buy them, and you can weld them in, and they work just fine if it's what you want to do. Forging the frog plate is the thing. This happens to be 3/4 by 1/4 stock, and I lay it on the anvil and I want to find the center of it. You could go and get your measure it, mark it, one. But this is a blacksmith trick. The blacksmith taught me this. To find the center of the stock, you lay the two pieces together so the ends are even. And if they're not exactly the same length, just leave the same space at each end so that they're both the same. And I mark the ends of them so that you can, if I was doing a live demonstration, I just showed you. I mark the ends so you can see where they're pointing. So you lay them side by side and you look at it and you draw that white line across the middle. And that's supposed to be the middle of the stock. Then you turn them end for end so that this end is at this end this time, this end is at this time. And see where you drew the line? You weren't in the middle, were you? But now, you can easily find the middle because the distance is so close together, you can easily find the middle. And that's more accurate than I can be with a measure. If you find the middle of the stock, put it on the edge of the anvil, hit it, and it makes a mark in the stock right here. It's nothing but a place to catch the stock when you run it down the edge of the anvil. You can feel it catch in the corner of the anvil. And that's the center of the stock. And that gives you the opportunity to forge the metal thinner here. You do both sides. I can do that in one heat. If you're not used to doing it, it might take you 2 heats, but you should be able to make this much indentation in it in one heat. And then I call it breaking the back of the stock. You just hold it and hit it in the middle and bend it. It'll bend right there. And then knock it together. You got to weld the center. Make sure you weld it and weld it good, because if you don't, it'll break. There's a lot of weight. There's more weight than you can actually imagine on the frog blades. I always leave a little bit of space in between. I don't knock them completely together. I leave a little bit of space so that the weld can go down and weld halfway on each side of the stock. And this is what I mean. If you don't have a shop to make these, and you don't have a welder in your truck, hardly anybody carries a torch anymore. So, but like I say, you can still buy them. They can make them in a shop like I do, bring a bunch of them. This one is straight, and this one is muled out. And the reason for that is, some horses, you can just use this, depending on the distance between the heels. When they're straight, there's very little modification to the shoe, you can just weld them right in. But if the foot is wider than the frog blade, they have to be bent out or muled out. Make sure you weld them good, because like I said, there's a tremendous amount of weight on the horse that is on. And that's one of the manufactured ones. They just drop right in there really nice. And there's several companies I notice now that are even in the marketplace. Now, shared load means that instead of the weight being on the hoof wall or the weight being on the wall, it's on the entire bottom of the foot. And you can only use that on horses that don't need frog support. And the reason is, I've already explained it to you, the blood supply. Even though this is shared load, it's still going to put more weight on the sole in some cases than you would want to be there. But to do this, we used to use this mesh material in the Equithane, the black Equithane, and put it in there and put this pad on the bottom so it would leak out, and then let the horse stand on it. That's a big key. If you're going to do this, make sure you let the horse stand on it before it dries, before it hardens. That way, it's perfectly formed to the horse's foot. There's no extra. If there's too much in there, it'll squish out somewhere and force it out. But this is what it looks like when it takes off. You can see it. It conforms to the whole bottom of the foot. And this is a handy device to use for horses that have crummy feet, but they're not on the run or anything like that, and they're working hard. It keeps a nice foot on the horse, and that's what I've used it for. But I've never used it for lame horse.
Is there any situation where you would recommend a 4-in underneath your frog pad? Or is that going to share the load all the way around and defeat the frog?
The question is there any time that I would put a pour underneath my frog pad? Well, I do use Equithane in my pads in a place where it's all muddy, like you see in this slide, and the mud gets under the pad. Well, the pad will collect debris. It'll get underneath the pad, and any frog support device, you'll get bedding and mud and stuff will build up around the frog plate because of the way it's configured. So what I do is I take the Equa Pack, you know, the soft one?
Yes, sir.
And I put it in the bottom of the foot. I put it in the foot, put a piece of tape across the heel so it doesn't squirt out. And I only put it in so that it comes up to the bottom of the pad, not to the ground surface. And that that way it won't bear any weight, the sole won't bear any weight, and it'll keep all the debris from collecting into the pad. It's a very good way to keep the pads clean. Because people don't have enough hook picks, I guess, or they forgot where they put it, because they very rarely pick out the feet when they need to. So, okay, but anyway, we're getting close to the end here. So this was just to show you that underneath these pads, how the dirt builds up and can cause sole pressure, and that sole pressure is not a good thing. And then fitting the hot bars, I just want to touch on this. I fit all my hot bars hot so that I can see the burn on the foot. And the burn on the foot needs to be a good burn like normal around the hoof wall, and also at the same time a burn on the frog. That tells you that it's all touching at the same time. Everything has to touch at the same time. The frog plate, when you look at the shoe, it's going to look like this. The burn on the shoe and the burn on the frog. Do not, when you fit it, it's only burned on the frog plate, that means the frog plate is bent down too far. It touched first. You want it all to touch at the same time. It wants to look like this. Burn here, burn all the way around. And you say, well, how's that gonna work? When the horse loads, the frog, the bony column descends, and that picks up the weight. I thought this was pretty interesting. If I do a job in 30 minutes, it's because I spent 10 years, in some cases 40 years, learning how to do it. And you owe me for the 40 years, not the 10 minutes. That's a good thing for everybody to remember. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.